Joining me now, Tom Philipson, former White House Council of Economic Advisors chairman. It's great to see you, Tom. And this is really an important story because we're not getting back to where we were with respect to the labor market and our pre-pandemic levels. This administration is saying the 10 million jobs that it created, it makes it seem like they're new jobs. Those are people that did go back to work, but you've got these 3.5 million people who are sitting on the sidelines because it's better for them. It's more profitable for them to do that versus getting back in there and trying to earn a living themselves. And the government is enabling this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, what's going on is that the private sector, the companies have to compete with the government for their workers, and they're competing on pretty difficult terms. The government pays you sometimes equally much as you used to earn. And on top of it, you have 100% days off with paid leave, essentially. Because you don't have to do anything. So that has two consequences. So you basically have, in any market, when you have a supply cut, you have volume go down and prices up. In a labor market, when you have a labor supply cut back because of these reasons, you have missing workers of 3.5 million. That's the volume. And then you have an increase in wages because the companies have to compete away the workers from that government program, essentially. And that's what we've seen in the latest employment reports, that wages are rapidly increasing.
And that's the thing, right? You have to pay more to get people to actually show up. When you raise those wages, your expenses go up. If you're a company, your bottom line shrinks. This is all part of what's contributing to inflation, as well as the fact that you have these people who are at home on the sidelines getting checks, and they're going out and spending money because they have all this time on their hands on top of it. And so how do you ever get out of this vicious cycle?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the study you mentioned is very pertinent, and it only considers unemployment insurance and Obamacare. It's done by Casey Mulligan and others, which is, we were happy to have as a chief economist at CEA when I was there. But what also is, wearing on this is the Medicaid expansions into the middle class. You don't need a job to get a health coverage. And also the food stamps, in addition to other benefits, that the child care tax credit, et cetera, that makes this harder for companies essentially to retain workers because they have to compete with these benefits in raising compensation.
And some of the things that you mentioned, I mean, these did not exist before. These were born under the Biden administration and its spending packages, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act has extended the so-called American Rescue Plan, where, the only thing it rescued us from was better growth, essentially.
Yeah, we didn't need to be rescued at the time the first bill went through, and then we continued to spend as a nation. And what's interesting to me is we talk to CEOs, we're talking to people on Wall Street. They're all looking at the tea leaves, Tom, and they're saying we are not set up to have a prosperous 2023. You can debate what the definition of a recession is, and the administration likes to do that. Many people think we're in it right now, and that things are going to get worse in 2023, and that consumers and just the average American, the person who actually is going to work, has to brace for a pretty tough year ahead. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think what's important, this recession definition, I think is kind of irrelevant for your viewers. What's important is that their standard of living, how much they could buy for their paycheck, has gone down because of the heavy inflation, essentially. Yeah. But we're coming off an enormous runway that consumers have. We sort of prepped up demand for consumers during the pandemic. There was more income growth in the pandemic than under any U.S. economic boom, let alone it was the first recession we have income growth in disposable income, which is private plus government. But we have more income growth than any government boom. They're sitting about 1.5 trillion in excess saving compared to the before the pandemic. So they're coming off that runway, and that's what we're going to see now in 2023, how fast that goes and how dramatically the consumer essentially stops buying.
So I do understand that people stayed home and they saved a lot because they were working from home, they weren't traveling, commuting costs, clothing, all of those different things from when we were under lockdown. And all this, $1.5 trillion that you mentioned were saved. You don't think that we've run through a lot of that? It feels like people have spent a lot of the savings. Now they're relying on plastic. Everything costs more, and that they're going to, find themselves sort of digging into a hole next year. I mean, people would debate whether that 1.5 trillion is still there.
Yeah, no, it was a lot larger half a year and a year ago when, they got all this money, and then on top of it, they couldn't spend it because they were staying at home, essentially, right? So there was a lot of accumulation. There was very high income and very high savings during COVID. Most of it, was government income. And that has been run down now quite dramatically, and it's going quickly.
Yeah.
You're right. We have debt levels that are very, going up. People are taking on the credit card. What's different from the previous crash in 2008 is that the housing debt is very, very small relative to the housing equity, essentially. We're not even close to those numbers. But in credit card debt, people are running up their debt levels.
And interest rates are going up. And even when credit cards were charging egregious interest rates before, now they're even higher. And that is, a little bit what I worry about from a personal finance standpoint. But we will see how this all shakes out next year. Tom, always great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.